I have been thinking for a number of years about Ted Kyzinski, the Unabomber, and kind of wondering. It's a tragic life that he had, and trying to recover, like, a sense of how can a life that went so wrong, how can it be recovered, or how could something for that person actually, like, secure something important? How could he do something important to make, like, to give back to society, what he took from it? And it's a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing. But Shawshank Redemption, the movie, indicated to me that a person can do that. The character of Red in that movie, based on Stephen King's stories. That's one of Stephen King's best stories. But that Shawshank Redemption is one of the best movies that I've ever seen, and I think it challenged many of my beliefs about convicts and about the criminal justice system, and it was a deeply thoughtful movie and a very humanizing movie, I think, for all people who see it. So important was it to my thinking that like I said, it changed my beliefs about people. It reminded me of how dynamic we are as individuals and how much we change from one moment to the next. That's also, I think, a way that we can fail to be fully human if we don't see how dynamic we are and how we're always changing. Each of us, every person is always changing from moment to moment. And, it's a horrible thing to think that Ted did that and that he lost his way like that. That he turned something that was so, and I think it was precisely because of the inward nature of the kind of mind like his that could contemplate higher mathematics. And so he was already a person apart from society, and it wasn't his fault. It was just the nature of that kind of thinking that he was good at, that happened to be sort of antisocial. And any person who has the ability to turn inside like that and then turn the mind over and over again and do really complex, his specialty was in numeric theory or number theory, and in the analysis of higher numeric functions like the zeta function in the Riemann hypothesis. And so he could take complex domains of mathematics, and he could work through and take from propositions in mathematics and derive really, really important truths and implications from whole domains of mathematics today. So really, as physicists work on a final theory of physics, they need not necessarily think of themselves in the university as not needing the help of someone like that today. And it would give Ted a way of reconnecting to society. And he could do that, but it has to be on the basis of something that gets him back into the field, if you will. And I think if somebody were to go and meet him and present him with a textbook on logic or logical theory, and he learned the theory of Whitehead and Russell, Princippia, and he learned the language of Princippia, he might be able to actually take the Riemann zeta function, and he might be able to work and prove important truths about it that Steven Weinberg and others will need the knowledge of in order to solve the SU3, 2, 3, 4, 5 group of equations. And so he could work at these kinds of things because he's imprisoned and he's going to be in prison probably for a very long time. I would hope that he is eventually transferred to another facility, and he's given like a more home-like environment, so that he doesn't have to sit every day in a jail cell, and maybe he sits more in something like I'm sitting here, and he does his work. And his work does not involve building bombs. It involves like doing astronomy and calculations and logic and work in mathematics, which is what his mind is suited for. It's difficult to imagine somebody that disjointed from society, and then to see how what he loved the most ended up being turned. He had to turn it against himself in a way, because he ended up doing something with it that probably today it's probably terrifying for him to think of technology, because he got so hostile to technology, as you can see from reading the manifesto that he wrote. So you can see that he turned against something that would have in essence been what he would have produced. But a mathematician, a very good mathematician named George Polya, he made an important statement about mathematics, and I always loved it when I learned it a long time ago in Dr. Heinrich's class, who taught me mathematics a long time ago. I didn't think I could learn mathematics, and so I was so afraid of it that I took Dr. Heinrich's class, so that when I got to Loyola, I didn't have to take any math classes. So I took Dr. David Heinrich's Math 115 at Rock Valley, because I was so terrified that if I got to Loyola, it'd be too hard for me. So I took David Heinrich's class at Rock Valley College, and I did pretty well at it. I surprised myself by doing pretty well at it. He was testing for certain things, like how observant are you about the author's name of your textbook. So he's a very clever instructor. He asked on one of his tests, like, who is the author of your textbook, just to see which students noticed that it was Smith was the author of the textbook. And that's where I learned about Ramanujan, his mathematical ability with respect to the cab, and him noting that feature of that number that he ended up proving an important truth about. But I won't go into that. But it was Polya in his text, Here's How to Prove It. He raised an issue about Riemann's zeta function, and today it's known as the Hilbert-Polya conjecture. And it was Polya that said that there might be something real in nature, a nexus or matrix of numbers that apply to Riemann's zeta function. That something in nature, say the growth of a tree, would have that function, and then you'd be able to see why the numbers that you put into Riemann's zeta function when you at 1/2, which is it's the 1/2s produced by the function. When the right numbers are put into it, it produces it's like a mathematical function is something where if you plug f of x is the simplest function in mathematics, or it's the simplest formulation of a function. So you're saying a domain of numbers with this x might be a number of operations, mathematical operations. Say you might have a plus b plus c plus d, and f is then the function of that series carried over the entire domain of whatever domain you happen to be working with. If you're taking the real numbers, then you're moving all the real numbers through the function and seeing which numbers come out of the function. And so with Riemann's zeta function, Polya, I was going to say, he said, he made a comment, and I always liked it because I thought it was so totally honest. And he was like, I was too smart to be a philosopher, but I wasn't smart enough to be a physicist, so I became a mathematician. I thought that was an excellent comment, because today, and then, I started thinking of over the years, like I was way too smart to become a physicist, and I was, way too smart, and I was not smart enough to become a physicist, and I was not smart enough to become a mathematician, so I became a philosopher. That was my own way of putting it. And I'm not even smart enough to be a philosopher, so I didn't become any of those things. But you can think of it a lot of things. But it's you can tell that Hungarian mathematician. He was one of the Hungarian. Those Hungarians, man, they can produce genius. Oh my God. I don't know if it was their school system or what, but they could produce geniuses like Palea, who wrote Here's How to Prove It, and then 2 volumes on using statistical methods of proving different things in science, proving different scientific propositions and propositions involving probability and induction. And so his books are about that. And so Riemann's zeta function today could be worked on by Theodore Kyzinski, and he could end up proving that hypothesis, and it would give him something to do while he's in prison, and it would aid our physicists at completing a final theory of physics, and it might prove that Palea's conjecture, which was that there's something real in nature, namely the vortices of space-time themselves, which produce the numbers, the zeta zero. They're called zeta zeros, but that's only because when you put certain numbers at that are generated by the number 1/2 and -1/2, in my belief that those are applied in a sense to the spin states of electrons and positrons, and so they produce those zeta zeros, the important ones or the significant ones that Riemann pointed to. But he could possibly prove this, and if he proved this, then it would give Weinberg and Ed Witten and others, it would give them an important step in doing the equations that they're working on in physics today, and it would restore to him, kind of like in Shawshank Redemption, it would restore to him like the dignity of what he loved when he was young, when he was like a young 18-year-old or 20-year-old in Berkeley. He loved doing mathematics, and I don't think he liked technology as much. And he realized that the world can be very noisy, and the world can kind of interfere with your thinking. And he learned all kinds of things that really made him quite an angry person. But I think he can be restored, like Red was restored to the world after he had committed a terrible crime in Shawshank. He could be restored in precisely this way, and he might actually help us solve Riemann's hypothesis. And if he did, he would be fleshing out or bringing into being for mathematicians today entire domains of propositions that could be translated from princippia to mathematical language, and it might give them the kinds of things they need in physics to complete the final theory of the cosmos. And so I think it would restore him to his sense of dignity of himself, in the way that Shawshank redeemed Andy Dufresne and Red together. And it might be that way, but it might be that in the future that I meet with Ted and I actually bring to Ted a book on Princippia and try to get him to learn Princippia and actually do this work, because I think he needs something to occupy his mind, and he needs to be able to feel like he's a part of what he once loved, and he's not completely alienated forever.